During family lunch, my daughter spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "She's not welcome. She's only here because she pays the bills." I quietly got up from the table. The next day, I froze all the family's finances. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. The words still echo in my head. I can't stop hearing them, over and over, like a broken record that keeps playing the most painful part of a song you once loved. I'm Lucille, 67 years old, and I never thought my own daughter would reduce me to nothing more than a checkbook. That Sunday was supposed to be special. I'd spent the morning preparing my famous pot roast, the one Jovi used to beg for when she was a little girl. Her husband, Mark, had been dropping hints about needing money for renovations on their house, but I'd pretended not to notice. I always did. For decades, I'd been the silent supporter, the financial backbone, the one they turned to when bills piled up or opportunities arose. "Mom, could you bring the gravy?" Jovi called from the dining room. I remember picking up the gravy boat, my hands steady despite the arthritis that had been bothering me lately. I walked into the dining room where my family sat: Jovi, Mark, their 3 children, and Mark's brother who was visiting from out of town. I caught the tail end of a conversation that stopped abruptly when I entered. Mark's face wore that familiar expression, the one he got when he was planning something. My grandson Tyler avoided my eyes, and for a moment, I thought I saw shame there. "Here you go, dear," I said, placing the gravy boat next to Jovi. "Thanks," she muttered, barely looking up. The conversation resumed, but I felt like an outsider watching through a window. They discussed their upcoming vacation to Europe, the new car Mark was considering, and the private tennis lessons for the kids. All things I had directly or indirectly financed. "So, Lucille," Mark began, using that tone he always adopted when money was about to enter the conversation. "We've been thinking about adding a pool in the backyard. The Hendersons just put one in, and it's really raised their property value." Before I could respond, Jovi's phone rang. She excused herself, walking into the kitchen to take the call. The tension at the table eased a bit, and Mark's brother asked me about my garden. It was the first genuine interest anyone had shown in me all afternoon. Then Jovi returned, her face flushed with irritation. "That was Diane. She wanted to know if we're still going in on that beach house rental with them this summer." "What did you tell her?" Mark asked. "That will let her know." Jovi's eyes flicked to me, then away. "We need to figure out our finances first." Mark nodded knowingly, and then they both looked at me. Not directly, but in that way people do when they're waiting for you to offer something. The beach house. "Sounds lovely," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "Which beach were you thinking of?" Tyler, my 16-year-old grandson, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Grandma, you don't have to." "It's Myrtle Beach," Jovi cut him off. "But it's expensive. $4,000 for the week." The table fell silent. I felt the weight of their expectation press down on me like a physical thing. "I see," I murmured, taking a sip of water to buy myself time. "Well, you know, Mom," Jovi continued, her voice taking on that artificial sweetness I'd come to recognize, "we wouldn't even consider it if we weren't having to put so much money into the house repairs this year." That's when Mark's brother, I think trying to be helpful, asked, "Don't you own the house they live in, Lucille?" The silence that followed was deafening. I saw Jovi's face harden, her jaw tightening in that way it did when she was a teenager about to explode. "No," she said coldly. "We own our house. Mom just helped with the down payment. The just hung in the air. Just $80,000. Just the money I'd saved for 20 years working double shifts as a nurse. And the college funds," Mark added quickly, as if trying to spread the blame. "Your mom helps with the kids' education." That's when it happened. Jovi looked at her brother-in-law and said those words that would change everything between us. "She's not welcome here. She's only here because she pays the bills." The table went silent. Even Mark looked shocked, but no one, Not one person defended me or challenged her words. I placed my napkin beside my plate, my hands suddenly cold. I looked at my daughter, searching for any sign of the little girl who once climbed into my lap after skinning her knee, who cried on my shoulder when her first boyfriend broke her heart, who called me at 2 a.m. when she went into labor with Tyler, because she was scared and wanted her mom. There was nothing there. Just a woman who saw me as a financial resource, nothing more. I rose from the table without a word. No dramatic exit, no tears, just quiet dignity as I gathered my purse and cardigan. "Mom?" Jovi called, perhaps realizing she had gone too far. "Where are you going?" "Home," I said simply. "I'm tired." That night, I didn't cry. Instead, I pulled out all my financial records, the mortgage payments I'd been making on their house, the monthly transfers to their accounts, the college funds for the grandchildren, the credit cards I paid off last Christmas. By morning, I had made my decision. I called my bank and my lawyer. By noon, every account was frozen, every automatic payment stopped. For the first time in 20 years, my money would stay in my account. My phone rang at 2:17 p.m. Jovi's name flashed on the screen. I let it go, to voicemail. I wasn't just a checkbook, and it was time they learned that lesson. I've always been a hard worker. That's something my generation took pride in. I was 16 when I got my first job at Wilson's Pharmacy, stocking shelves after school. By 18, I was working full-time while putting myself through nursing school at night. When I met Richard, Jovi's father, I already had my own small apartment and a reliable car. Not much, but it was mine, earned through my own sweat. Richard died when Jovi was only 8. Aneurysm. One day, he was complaining about a headache. The next day, I was a widow with a second grader who couldn't understand why Daddy wasn't coming home. I didn't have time to fall apart. There were bills to pay, a child to raise, a future to secure. I took on extra shifts at the hospital, moonlighted at a nursing home on weekends, and somehow managed to be there for every school play and parent-teacher conference. My mother watched Jovi when I worked nights, and I'd come home exhausted, sleep for 4 hours, then wake up to make Jovi's breakfast and see her off to school. "You're the best mom," Jovi used to tell me, throwing her arms around my neck. "Even better than Emily's mom, and she doesn't even have to work." Those words carried me through the hardest days. The days when my feet were so swollen I could barely walk, when I was so tired my vision blurred, when I wondered if I was doing the right thing, pushing myself so hard. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. I saved every penny I could for Jovi's college fund. I wanted her to have choices I never had. She was smart, so smart, and got a scholarship to Northwestern. I was so proud I cried when I helped her move into her dorm. But even with the scholarship, there were expenses. Books, housing, meal plans, spending money. I took a second mortgage on our small house to make sure she had everything she needed. "Don't worry, Mom," she'd said. "When I graduate and get a good job, I'll take care of you." She met Mark in her junior year. He was handsome, confident, from a good family, with connections but not much money of their own. I noticed how his eyes lit up when Jovi mentioned, "My nursing career, my pension plan, my careful savings. Your mom is so successful," he'd say, squeezing Jovi's hand. "You're lucky to have such a strong role model." I should have seen the signs then, but I was just happy Jovi had found someone who seemed to love her. They married right after graduation. I gave them $25,000 as a wedding gift, most of my savings at the time. They used it for a down payment on a small starter home. 2 years later, Mark decided he wanted to go to law school. Jovi called me, excited about the possibilities but worried about the cost. "It's only 3 years, Mom," she said. "And then Mark will be making 6 figures. We just need a little help getting through." A little help turned into paying their mortgage for 3 years, paying off their credit card debt, helping them upgrade to a larger house when Jovi got pregnant with Tyler. Mark graduated, joined a firm, and the six-figure salary materialized. But somehow, they never seemed to have enough. There was always something. Private schools for the kids, a new car because the old one wasn't safe enough, home renovations because property value is everything in this market. And I always said yes, even when it meant postponing my own retirement, even when it meant taking on consulting work when my arthritis made bedside nursing too painful, even when it meant watching my own dreams of traveling, of taking painting classes, of finally having time for myself slip further and further away. "You're a lifesaver, Mom," Jovi would say, but the gratitude became more perfunctory over time, the expectation more entrenched. I barely recognized when things shifted, when I went from being valued as a mother to being valuable as a financial resource. It happened so gradually, like erosion slowly wearing away a shoreline. The day after I froze the accounts, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Jovi, Mark, even my oldest grandson Tyler, all calling, leaving increasingly frantic messages. Finally, around dinner time I picked up. "Mom!" Jovi's voice was shrill. "What the hell is going on? The mortgage payment bounced and the kids' tuition is due next week." "I'm not making those payments anymore, Jovi," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "What? Why not? Is something wrong with your accounts? Do you need me to come over and help you sort it out?" The assumption that this had to be a mistake, that I couldn't possibly have made this decision deliberately, stung more than I expected. "Nothing's wrong with my accounts," I replied. "I've simply decided to stop paying your bills." Silence then. "Is this because of what I said at lunch?" "Mom, I was just frustrated with Mark's brother prying into our business." "You know I didn't mean it, didn't you?" I asked quietly. "Of course not. You're my mother. I love you." "You haven't shown me love in a very long time, Jovi. What you've shown me is that you expect access to my money," she gasped. "That's not fair after everything we've done for you." "What exactly have you done for me?" I interrupted, something I rarely did. "When was the last time you called just to check on me, not to ask for something? When was the last time you invited me to dinner without a financial request waiting for dessert?" "You're being ridiculous. We're family. Family helps each other." "Yes, they do, but it's been one way for too long." "So what? You're just cutting us off? Just like that? What about the kids? What about their education? Their future?" "The kids are still my grandchildren, and I'll make sure their tuition is paid directly to their schools. But the mortgage, the car payments, the credit cards, those are your responsibility now. We can't afford all that on our own. Mark's firm had cutbacks last year, you know that." "Mark makes $150,000 a year, Jovi. Most people manage to live quite well on that. But our lifestyle is beyond your means. It always has been. I've just been subsidizing it." Her voice turned cold. "I can't believe you're doing this to us. After everything we've been through together." "I'm not doing anything to you, Jovi. I'm just stopping doing everything for you." The call ended with her shouting that I would regret. This, that I was being selfish, that I didn't understand how hard they had it. I sat in my quiet living room afterward, looking at the photos on my mantel. Jovi as a baby in my arms, as a gap-toothed first grader, as a teenager with braces, as a bride. My beautiful daughter. When had she started seeing me as a bank instead of a mother? And why had I let her? The doorbell rang, startling me from my thoughts. Through the peephole, I could see Mark standing on my porch, his expression thunderous. I took a deep breath and opened the door, bracing for the confrontation I knew was coming. This was just the beginning. Mark stood on my porch, his tailored suit wrinkled and his normally perfectly styled hair disheveled. This wasn't the polished attorney who carefully calculated every word. This was a man who just had his safety net yanked away. "We need to talk," he said, stepping forward as if I'd automatically invite him in. I held my ground. I think we do, but not here, not in my home. His eyes widened, unused to me setting boundaries. Lucille, be reasonable. I am being reasonable, I said calmly, for the first time in years. Let's meet at Denny's tomorrow morning at 9. You, me, and Jovi. This can't wait until it can and it will. I started to close the door. 9 a.m. Denny's on Lakeside Drive. But the mortgage is due on the 15th. You have 10 days to figure it out. I shut the door before he could argue further. That night, I slept better than I had in years. No worrying about their financial problems. No mental calculations of how to stretch my pension to cover their lifestyle and my basic needs. Just peaceful, dreamless sleep. I arrived at Denny's 15 minutes early the next morning, choosing a booth in the corner for privacy. I ordered coffee and waited. They walked in 5 minutes late, Jovi's face tense, Mark's professionally neutral. As they slid into the booth across from me, I noticed Jovi's designer handbag, the one I'd bought her for Christmas last year, and the expensive watch glinting on Mark's wrist. "Thank you for meeting me," I said, as if I were the one who had requested this. "Mom, this has gone far enough," Jovi began immediately. "You've made your point." "Have I? What point do you think I was making?" She blinked, thrown off by my direct question. That you were hurt by what I said. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. But you said it, I replied. And no one at that table disagreed with you or defended me. Not your husband, not your children. No one. Mark cleared his throat. "Lucille, we all say things we don't mean sometimes. Families fight. But cutting off financial support without warning is what? My right. Because it is my money, Mark." The waitress came to take their orders. Jovi asked for just coffee. Mark ordered the Grand Slam breakfast, as if this were a normal family meeting. When the waitress left, Jovi leaned forward. "Mom, we can't afford the mortgage payment, you know that. We've budgeted based on your help." "You've budgeted based on my money," I corrected. "There's a difference." "It's just a figure of speech," Mark interjected smoothly, lawyer mode activated. "The point is, we've structured our finances with the understanding that you would continue to support, to pay for everything," I interrupted. "Let's be honest here. I pay your mortgage, I pay your car payments, I fund the children's education, I cover the credit card bills when they get too high. I've even been paying for your country club membership." Jovi had the grace to look embarrassed. "About that last one. What exactly do you pay for yourselves?" I asked. Mark stiffened. "We work hard, Lucille. I'm at the firm 60 hours a week. And yet, somehow, you never seem to have enough to cover your basic expenses. Where does your money go, Mark?" He glanced at Jovi, who suddenly became very interested in stirring her coffee. "We have expenses," he said vaguely. "So do I. But I've been putting yours ahead of mine for 20 years. The waitress delivered Mark's breakfast. He picked up his fork but didn't eat. "Mom," Jovi said, her voice softening into the tone she used when she wanted something. "We're not saying you haven't been generous. You have, and we appreciate it. More than you know. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like you expect it, like it's your right to have me bankroll your lifestyle." "That's not fair." Jovi's voice rose, drawing glances from nearby tables. "What's not fair is treating your mother like an ATM," I said quietly. "What's not fair is only calling me when you need money. What's not fair is telling your brother-in-law that I'm only welcome in your home because I pay the bills." Tears welled in Jovi's eyes. I said I was sorry about that. "Are you sorry you said it, or sorry that I finally heard how you really feel?" Mark put down his fork. "Let's focus on solutions. What do you want, Lucille?" The question surprised me. What did I want? No one had asked me that in years. "I want to be valued as a mother and a grandmother, not as a financial resource," I said. "Finally." "I want to be invited to dinner because you want my company?" Not because you need a check. I want to know that if I stopped paying for everything tomorrow, you'd still want me in your lives." "Of course we would," Jovi protested. "Then, prove it," I said. "Live within your means, pay your own bills. Invite me over for dinner with no financial strings attached." Mark's jaw tightened. "And the mortgage? The tuition payments?" "As I told Jovi, I'll continue to pay the grandchildren's tuition directly to their schools. That's a promise I made, to them, and I won't break it. But the mortgage, the cars, the credit cards, those are your responsibility now." "We'll lose the house," Jovi whispered. "Only if you choose to. You could downsize. You could economize. You could live like most people do, within your means." "This is ridiculous," Mark muttered. "You're punishing us because your feelings got hurt." I looked at him steadily. "No, Mark. I'm finally respecting myself enough to stop enabling behavior. That has made me feel used and unappreciated for years." "So that's it? You're just cutting us off?" Jovi's voice trembled. "I'm giving you the opportunity to show me that I matter to you beyond what I can give you financially." I reached for my purse. "Ball's in your court now." As I stood to leave, Jovi grabbed my wrist. "Mom, wait. There's something you don't know." I paused, noting the panic in her eyes. We're in trouble." "Real trouble." She glanced at Mark, who was staring stonily at his plate. "Mark made some investments. They didn't pan out. We're underwater, Mom. Way underwater." Mark's head snapped up. "Jovi, don't." "She needs to know." Jovi turned back to me, tears now flowing freely. "It's not just the mortgage. We've got creditors calling. We took out a second mortgage last year. We didn't tell you because we thought we could fix it." I slowly sat back down, a cold feeling spreading through my chest. "How bad is it?" Mark finally met my eyes. "Bad. About $340,000 in debt, not counting the mortgages." The number hit me like a physical blow. "How? How is that possible?" "It doesn't matter now," he said flatly. "What matters is that without your help, we'll lose everything. The house, the cars, our credit rating, everything." I looked between them. These two adults who had built their entire lives on my financial support and then secretly dug themselves into a hole so deep I wasn't sure even I could pull them out. "I see," I said quietly. "So this isn't just about paying your regular bills anymore. You need me to bail you out of a financial disaster you've been hiding from me." The naked truth lay exposed on the table between us, as cold and unappetizing as Mark's untouched breakfast. After discovering the extent of Jovi and Mark's financial disaster, I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. $340,000 in debt, plus two mortgages on a house that was already beyond their means. How had it come to this? And how had I been so blind? I left them at Denny's with a simple statement. "I need time to think." I ignored Jovi's tearful pleas and Mark's thinly veiled threats about how the family would fall apart without my help. I needed clarity, and I wouldn't find it sitting across from them. At home, I made myself a cup of tea and sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd paid bills for decades, carefully budgeting to support not just myself, but an entire family. That wasn't my responsibility. The weight of their expectations, their entitlement, their deception felt like a physical pressure on my chest. I picked up the phone and called the one person who had always given me straight advice, my old nursing colleague, Dorothy. "They did what?" Dorothy exclaimed after I explained the situation. "Lucille, you've been a human ATM for those people for years, and they hid this from you?" "I feel like such a fool," I admitted. "All these years, I thought I was helping them build a secure future. Instead, I was enabling them to live beyond their means and make terrible financial decisions." "It's not your fault they took advantage of your generosity," Dorothy said firmly. "But it is your responsibility to decide what happens next. And, honey, you don't owe them a bailout." "But they'll lose everything," I said weakly. The maternal instinct to protect still strong despite everything. So what? They're adults. They made these choices. Maybe losing everything is exactly what they need to finally grow up and take responsibility for their own lives. Her words were harsh, but rang with truth. For too long, I'd been the safety net that prevented Jovi and Mark from experiencing the natural consequences of their actions. In trying to protect them from hardship, I'd actually prevented them from developing the resilience and financial responsibility they needed. What about the grandchildren? I asked, my heart aching at the thought of Tyler, Emma, and little Jason being uprooted. Pay their tuition directly to the schools, like you said you would. Be there for them emotionally. But don't use them as an excuse to keep enabling their parents. After we hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. Then I went to my home office and pulled out a notebook. On one page, I listed all the financial support I had provided to Jovi and Mark over the years. On another, I wrote down all the times they had shown me genuine care, attention, and affection that wasn't connected to money. The disparity between the two lists was stark and painful. I spent the next week carefully considering my options. I spoke with my financial advisor and my lawyer. I looked at my own resources, at what I could realistically provide without jeopardizing my own security. And I came to a decision. When I called Jovi to ask her and Mark to meet me again, her voice was anxious but hopeful. "Does this mean you'll help us, Mom?" "It means I'm ready to talk," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Saturday, 10 a.m., my house." That Saturday, they arrived punctually for once. I noticed they drove their older car, not the luxury SUV I'd helped them purchase last year. A small sign that perhaps reality was beginning to sink in. I'd prepared a folder for each of them, which I handed over as they sat stiffly on my couch. "What's this?" Mark asked, opening his folder. "My terms," I said simply. They both stared at the documents inside. I'd outlined a plan. I would pay off $150,000 of their debt, less than half, but with strict conditions. They would need to sell their house and move to something within their actual budget. They would surrender the luxury vehicles and credit cards. They would work with a financial counselor of my choosing, who would have complete visibility into their finances for the next 5 years. And most importantly, they would sign a contract agreeing that this was the last financial assistance they would ever receive from me, aside from the grandchildren's education. "This is humiliating," Mark said finally, his face flushed with anger or embarrassment. Perhaps both. "More humiliating than bankruptcy?" I asked quietly. "Because that's where you're headed without this." Jovi was reading through the documents more carefully. "You want us to sell our house? Where will we live?" "Somewhere you can actually afford on Mark's salary. The financial counselor will help you figure out what that looks like." "The kids love their school, their neighborhood," she protested. "The schools they attend are covered by the tuition I'll continue to pay. As for the neighborhood, they'll adjust. Children are resilient when they have stable, honest parents." Mark closed his folder with a sharp snap. "And if we refuse these conditions?" I met his gaze steadily. "Then you're on your own. I won't throw good money after bad, Mark. Not anymore. You're enjoying this, aren't you?" he said bitterly. "Having us at your mercy." "No, Mark. I take no pleasure in seeing what my daughter and her family have come to. But I won't continue to enable behavior that's destructive to all of us." Jovi was crying quietly now, shoulders shaking. "I never thought it would come to this," she whispered. "Neither did I said, my voice softening slightly. "But here we are. And we have to deal with the reality in front of us, not the fantasy you've been living." She looked up at me, mascara smudged beneath her eyes. "What happened to us, Mom? When did we become this?" It was the first genuine moment between us in years, a flash of the real Jovi, not the entitled woman who saw me as a resource rather than a mother. It happened gradually, I said. One decision at a time. One expectation at a time. One boundary crossed at a time. I don't even know where to start fixing it, she admitted. You start by accepting these terms, I said gently. Not just the financial ones, but the understanding that our relationship needs to change. I want to be your mother, Jovi, not your banker. Mark was still bristling, but Jovi nodded slowly. We'll do it, she said, before he could object. We don't have a choice, but maybe we need this. Maybe we needed someone to finally say no. In that moment, I saw a glimmer of the daughter I'd raised, the one with determination and integrity, before money and status had corrupted her values. Over the next few months, things changed dramatically. Jovi and Mark sold their house and moved into a modest 3-bedroom townhouse. They traded in their luxury vehicles for practical, affordable alternatives. They met weekly with the financial counselor, who reported back to me that they were sticking to their budget, though not without struggle. The grandchildren adjusted better than anyone expected. Tyler, at 16, actually seemed relieved. It was weird before, he confided in me one afternoon when I picked him up from school. Everyone knew we couldn't really afford all that stuff. It felt fake. Out of the mouth of babes, I thought. As for me, I began to rebuild my own life, the one I'd put on hold for decades while supporting everyone else. I enrolled in a watercolor class I'd been eyeing for years. I joined a book club. I even started dating again, having coffee with a kind widower named Frank, who lived in my building. Most importantly, I began to establish a new relationship with my daughter. One based on genuine connection, not financial dependence. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks, times when old patterns threatened to reassert themselves. But slowly, steadily, we were finding our way to something healthier. One evening, Jovi called me. Not to ask for anything, but to invite me to dinner at their new home. Nothing fancy, she said quickly. Just spaghetti and meatballs. But I made them from scratch, using your recipe. As I hung up the phone, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time when it came to my daughter. Hope. 6 months had passed, since Jovi and Mark accepted my terms. Winter had given way to spring, and with it came tentative new growth in our relationship. The spaghetti dinner had been the first of several family meals where no one mentioned money or asked for anything. Just simple food and conversation that sometimes flowed naturally, sometimes stuttered awkwardly as we learned how to relate to each other without the dynamics of financial dependence. I was watering my porch plants one Saturday morning when a text message came through from Jovi. Can we talk today? Just us. It's important. My stomach tightened with instinctive worry. Had they fallen back into old habits? Were they struggling to maintain their new budget? Was this the beginning of another cycle of requests and expectations? I texted back, sure. Coffee at Rosie's at 2? Her reply came quickly. See you then. Rosie's was a small cafe where I often met with Dorothy and my book club friends. It wasn't fancy, but the coffee was good and the atmosphere quiet enough for conversation. I arrived early, choosing a table near the window where spring sunlight streamed in, warming the worn wooden surface. Jovi arrived precisely at 2, wearing jeans and a simple blouse, a far cry from the designer clothes she'd once considered essential. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she wore minimal makeup. She looked younger somehow, more like the daughter I remembered before status and appearance became her defining concerns. Thanks for meeting me, she said, sliding into the chair across from me. Of course. Is everything okay? She nodded, ordering a plain coffee when the server stopped by. Once we were alone again, she took a deep breath. I've been doing a lot of thinking, she began, about us, about what happened, about who I became. I stayed silent, giving her space to continue. The financial counselor you hired for us, Diane, she doesn't just talk about money. She asks questions about values and priorities and And how we got so off track. Jovi stared into her coffee cup. Last week, she asked me when I started seeing you as a financial resource instead of just my mom. The question hung in the air between us, painful but necessary. What did you tell her? I asked gently. Jovi's eyes met mine, filled with a shame I'd never seen there before. I couldn't answer at first, but then I realized it started right after Tyler was born. We were struggling with the new house payment, and Mark suggested we ask you for help just until things stabilize. But things never stabilized because we kept increasing our expenses every time our income went up. She paused, taking a sip of coffee. Mark would say things like, "Your mom wants to help. It makes her happy." And I started to believe it, that somehow we were doing you a favor by taking your money. The honesty was startling, but refreshing. "And now?" I prompted. "Now I see how twisted that was, how we manipulated you, how I let myself be manipulated too, into thinking this was normal." She set down her cup. "Mom, I'm so ashamed of who I became. That comment at lunch. I've replayed it in my head 1,000 times. I can't believe I said that about my own mother." "Why did you?" I asked, not accusingly, but with genuine curiosity. Jovi sighed heavily. "Because I was terrified. Mark had made some really bad investments without telling me. Options trading, cryptocurrency, some startup that failed. We were drowning in debt. And I was angry at him, angry at myself for letting it happen, angry at the universe. And then you were there, this reminder of the responsible path I should have taken." She wiped away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "I lashed out at you because you represented everything I wasn't, financially stable, independent, content with what you had. It was easier to resent you than to face my own failures." Her honesty left me speechless for a moment. This was more insight and self-awareness than I'd seen from my daughter in years. "Thank you for telling me this," I said finally. "But you mentioned you wanted to talk about something important?" Jovi straightened her shoulders. "Yes. I've made a decision, and I wanted to tell you in person." She pulled an envelope from her purse and slid it across the table. "I've taken a job, a real one, with benefits and everything." I opened the envelope to find an offer letter from Westside Community Hospital. "You're going back to nursing?" Jovi had been a registered nurse before Tyler was born, but had never returned to work after her maternity leave. It had been one of many disappointments for me, seeing her abandon a career she'd once been passionate about. Part-time for now, while the kids are still in school. But yes. A small smile played at her lips. "It turns out they're desperate for experienced RNs, and my license is still valid. I'll need to do some refresher training, but I start next month." "Jovi, that's wonderful." I reached across the table to squeeze her hand. "Are you excited?" "Terrified," she admitted. "It's been so long." But also, yes, excited. I used to love nursing before I convinced myself I was too good for it. The self-awareness in that statement nearly took my breath away. "What does Mark think?" Her expression tightened slightly. "He's adjusting to the new reality. It was his idea that I should be a stay-at-home mom, even though we couldn't really afford it. I think he liked the status of having a wife who didn't need to work. But he's coming around." I studied my daughter's face, seeing both the girl she had been and the woman she was becoming. Someone who was finally taking responsibility for her own life. "I'm proud of you," I said simply. Her eyes filled with tears again. "Really? Even after everything?" "Especially after everything. It takes courage to face your mistakes and make changes. That's something to be proud of." We talked for another hour about her new job, about the kids' adjustment to their new home and lifestyle, about the small garden she'd started in their modest backyard. Not once did she mention needing money or help. When the check came, she insisted on paying, a small gesture that spoke volumes. As we walked to our cars, Jovi hesitated, then turned to me. There's one more thing. Mark and I are seeing a marriage counselor. Things have been difficult between us. All these changes, they've forced us to look at some hard truths about our relationship. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, meaning it. Despite my issues with Mark, I didn't want my daughter to suffer. Don't be, she said with surprising firmness. It's necessary. We built our marriage on a fantasy. The big house, the expensive vacations, the image we projected to the world. Now we have to figure out if there's anything real underneath all that. I nodded, understanding. And if there isn't? She took a deep breath. Then I'll face that too. I'm not afraid of the truth anymore, Mom. I can't afford to be. As I watched her drive away, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Pride in her growth, sadness for the wasted years, hope for her future. The daughter I'd raised was finally re-emerging from behind the facade of entitlement and materialism she'd hidden behind for so long. That evening, my phone rang. It was Mark. "Lucille," he said, his voice tight. "We need to talk." My guard immediately went up. "About what, Mark?" "About Jovi. About this ridiculous job she's taking. About all of it." He sounded angry, frustrated. "This isn't what we planned for our life. Plans change," I said calmly. "Not like this. I need you to talk some sense into her. Tell her she doesn't need to work, that we'll figure out another way." I closed my eyes, realizing that while Jovi was changing, Mark was desperately clinging to the old dynamic. "I won't do that, Mark. Jovi is making good choices for herself and your family." "Good choices?" he scoffed. "Working as a nurse when she could be what, Mark? Living beyond her means? Depending on others to fund her lifestyle? Is that really what you want for your wife? For your children to see?" His silence spoke volumes. "Mark," I said, my voice gentler, "the world you and Jovi built was never real. It was a house of cards that collapsed when I stopped holding it up. Isn't it time to build something solid instead?" "You don't understand," he said finally, his voice strained. "You've ruined everything." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, a sense of foreboding settling in my chest. Mark wasn't ready to change, and that meant trouble ahead for my daughter. I could only hope she was strong enough to face whatever came next. 1 year had passed since that fateful family lunch where Jovi's words had cut through my heart. 1 year since I'd frozen the finances and set in motion changes that none of us could have anticipated. As I stood in my kitchen preparing a simple breakfast, I marveled at how much had transformed in 12 short months. My phone chimed with a text message from Jovi. "Kids are excited for brunch. We'll be there at 11. Need us to bring anything?" I smiled, typing back. "Just yourselves. Everything's ready." Sunday brunch had become our new tradition over the past few months. No expectations, no financial discussions, just family time around my dining table. Sometimes Mark came, sometimes he didn't. Today, he wouldn't be joining us. 3 months ago, Jovi had moved out of their townhouse and into a small apartment, closer to the hospital where she now worked full-time. The separation hadn't been my idea. In fact, I'd encouraged her to keep trying with the marriage counseling. But Jovi had made her decision with clear eyes. "He can't let go of who we used to be," she'd explained when she told me about the separation. "Every time I try to embrace our new reality, he pulls me back. He's still waiting for you to change your mind, Mom. Still waiting for the money to start flowing again." I'd helped her move, of course. Not with money this time, but with hands-on support. Packing boxes, arranging furniture, watching the kids while she sorted through paperwork. The kind of help that showed love without enabling dysfunction. At exactly 11 a.m., my doorbell rang. Punctuality. Another small but significant change in Jovi's life. I opened the door to find her and the 3 children, all carrying small potted plants. "Happy Mother's Day," they chorused. I blinked in surprise. With everything that had happened, I'd completely forgotten what day it was. We grew these ourselves, Tyler explained proudly, handing me a small pot of lavender. In our community garden plot. Emma presented her gift next, a cheerful pot of marigolds. I picked orange because it's happy, she said, her 8-year-old logic irrefutable. 6-year-old Jason clutched his pot with both hands, careful not to spill any soil. I growed mint, he announced. You can make tea with it. Jovi stood behind them, her eyes warm with genuine affection. And this one's from me, she said, handing me a slightly larger pot containing a peace lily, because we've finally found some peace thanks to you. I ushered them inside, touched beyond words. In previous years, Mother's Day had meant expensive gifts purchased with my own money, designer handbags I never used, jewelry too fancy for my lifestyle, spa certificates that often went unredeemed because I was too busy helping with the grandchildren. These simple plants, grown with care and thought, meant infinitely more. As we settled around the table, I noticed how different Jovi looked. Her hair was shorter now, practical for her nursing shifts. Her clothes were simple but flattering. The constant tension that had once lined her face had softened. She laughed more easily, listened more attentively, especially to her children. "Mom," Tyler said as he helped himself to waffles. "Can I talk to you about something?" "Of course, sweetheart. I've been thinking about college." He glanced at Jovi, who nodded encouragingly. "I know you're planning to pay for it, but I'd like to apply for scholarships too. Maybe even work part-time during the school year." I raised my eyebrows, surprised. "That's very mature of you, Tyler. But you don't have to worry about the money. I promise to cover your education." He nodded. "I know, but I think I'd value it more if I contributed something myself." He looked down at his plate, suddenly shy. "That's one thing I learned from all this, that things mean more when you work for them." Out of the mouths of babes, indeed. After brunch, while the younger children played in the backyard, Jovi helped me with the dishes, another small change that spoke volumes. In the past, she would have considered such tasks beneath her. Tyler's. "Really grown up this year," I remarked. Jovi nodded, drying a plate with careful attention. "They all have. This hasn't been easy for them, but in some ways, I think it's been good. They're learning values I should have taught them years ago. You're teaching them now," I said gently. "That's what matters." She set down the dish towel and turned to face me. "Mom, there's something I've wanted to say to you for a while now. Something important." I waited, giving her space to find the words. "Thank you," she said simply. "Thank you for saying no. Thank you for forcing us to face reality. I was so angry at first, so hurt and betrayed. I thought you were punishing me. But now I see it was the most loving thing you could have done." Tears pricked at my eyes. "It wasn't easy. I know." She took my hands in hers. "But you loved me enough to do the hard thing. And look at us now. Indeed, look at us now." My daughter, my real daughter, not the entitled stranger she had become, stood before me, clear-eyed and genuine. The emotional distance that had grown between us over years of financial dependence had dissolved, replaced by authentic connection. Later that afternoon, as the children helped me plant their Mother's Day gifts in my small garden, my phone rang. It was Frank, the widower from my building who had become an increasingly important part of my life over the past year. "Happy Mother's Day," he said warmly. "How's the family brunch going?" "Wonderfully," I replied, watching as Jason carefully patted soil around his mint plant. "Will you still come for dinner tonight?" "Wouldn't miss it. I've got reservations at Bellini's at 6. I smiled. Frank understood that I valued experiences over material things, quality time over expensive gifts. Another refreshing change in my life. After we hung up, Jovi raised an eyebrow. Frank again? Yes, I admitted, feeling a blush rise to my cheeks. We're having dinner. Good, she said firmly. You deserve someone who appreciates you for you, not for what you can give them. The irony of her statement, so similar to what I had needed from her all these years, wasn't lost on either of us. We shared a knowing smile. As the afternoon drew to a close, Jovi gathered her things and the children. Same time next Sunday? She asked. I'd like that, I replied. She hesitated, then asked, would it be okay if I came over one evening this week too? I found Mom's old recipe book in one of my boxes, and I'd love to learn how to make her meatloaf, the one you used to make when I was little. My heart swelled. Any evening you want, just call first. After they left, I sat on my porch swing, reflecting on the journey of the past year. The pain of that family lunch seemed distant now, transformed by the growth and healing that had followed. My relationship with Jovi was stronger than it had been in decades, not because I was funding her lifestyle, but because we had finally found our way back to what mattered: genuine love and respect. Mark was still struggling, still angry at the changes I had set in motion. Perhaps one day he would understand, as Jovi had, that true wealth isn't measured in square footage or luxury cars, but in relationships built on respect and authenticity. As for me, at 67, I had discovered a new chapter of life. I had Frank, who appreciated me for who I was. I had my watercolor class, where I was creating art that brought me joy. I had financial security that I no longer compromised to enable others' poor choices. And most precious of all, I had the genuine love of my daughter and grandchildren. That evening, as Frank and I enjoyed dinner at a quiet corner table at Bellini's, he raised his glass in a toast. To you, Lucille, he said, his eyes crinkling warmly. One of the strongest women I've ever met. I thought about what real strength means, not the ability to carry others indefinitely, but the courage to set boundaries even when it hurts. The wisdom to know the difference between helping and enabling. The faith that authentic relationships can survive honesty and accountability. To new beginnings, I replied, clinking my glass against his, and to knowing your true value. Outside, the spring evening was giving way to a clear, star-filled night. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, new opportunities to practice the lessons we had all learned this year. But for now, in this moment, I was simply grateful. For the pain that had led to growth, for the courage to change what needed changing, and for the precious gift of being valued, at last, for who I was rather than what I could give. Sometimes, the most valuable thing a mother can give her children isn't financial support or material comfort. Sometimes it's the hard truth, delivered with love but unwavering clarity. And sometimes, as I had learned, it's the strength to say no, even when saying yes would be infinitely easier. In the end, that was the true value of a mother. Not what she gives, but what she teaches. And finally, after all these years, my lesson had been learned. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.